I think it's a lesson that bears repeating, because there might be somebody new listening to this episode who hasn't gone back yet. And it's just the thought of, if we had a waterfall, the water that's at the top of the waterfall, we also want to get all the way to the bottom of the waterfall. We want it to stay in alignment. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode. I was on the road, and we talked about doing the bare minimum is only enough in the beginning. But before I talk about today's episode, I just wanted to say thank you to all of the new listeners. I believe the last 2 months are the highest months of listens that we've had yet. So I appreciate you. If you are new here, welcome. If you've been here since the beginning, welcome back. And thank you so much for the support. I appreciate it. Again, this is a dream come true. Podcasting full-time is a dream come true, and being able to podcast about podcasting is a whole thing. So I am very, very grateful to each and every one of you. Keep your eyes peeled because the Facebook group is coming soon and all of that happy jazz. Okay. So for episode number 114, I was thinking of what I thought would be a valuable place to go, and I actually had somebody ask me a question that led me to land on what we're going to talk about today. A simple but common mistake to avoid, especially as a new podcaster. And I am guilty of this too. So even as a seasoned quote-unquote podcaster, for lack of better phrasing, I am as guilty of this as anybody else. And sometimes we need subtle reminders that we're making mistakes that we've told other people not to make, and that's kind of an example of what we're going to talk about today. So I was on a podcast pre-call today with someone, and as often it happens, the person said, "Hey, do you mind answering some questions about podcasting?" And I said, "Yeah, of course, sure." And I'm also happy to offer you a free call after if you want to bring a list of questions, but I'm happy to answer whatever you got right now. And they said, "What advice would you have for me, who is somebody super early? I want to do this full-time eventually. I have all these ideas. I have these different directions I want to go. What advice would you give to me?" And I said, I would pick 3 things to focus on, and I would put most of your time, effort, energy, focus, and resources, if you have financial resources available, into those things. I said, what I think a common mistake is people try to dig 100 holes that are a foot deep instead of digging 3 holes that are 30 feet deep or 3 holes that are 100 feet deep. It makes sense. In the beginning, you feel like you have so much to do. But going back to last week's episode, doing the bare minimum is only enough in the beginning, yes, but there is such thing as spreading yourself too thin in the beginning also. That's the reason I usually suggest people do the 5 layers that we talk about: social media, podcast, some sort of group, freebie, and then paid. But it's kind of in that order. Social media and the podcast are probably going to be the most challenging thing you do in the beginning, and it's probably going to take you a good amount of time to get down consistent episodes, to get a good audio and video set up. I mean, think about it. It might take you a year. It might take you 50 episodes before you feel comfortable doing things. And social media is an always evolving, changing landscape. And the algorithms are different, and platforms pop up, and sometimes it's video that works well, sometimes it's pictures that work well, depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it. But in the first year, if you're not hyper-focused on those 2 things, they're probably not going to grow as much as they could. And when I say grow, I don't necessarily mean number of followers and subscribers and all that. I mean your ability as a podcaster. And what I commonly see is people will do that, and then they'll say, well, you know what? I'm 15 episodes in. I feel like if I go from 1 episode to 2 episodes a week, I'll get more growth. Yeah, that's possible, but it's also twice as challenging, and you got to get twice as many guests and twice as much audio editing and video editing and posting and twice as much social media technically. So that might not be the answer. So why don't we just pick 3 things to go all in on, and those are the 3 things that you're never allowed, again, for lack of better phrasing, to lose focus of. So here's a story of how I messed this up. It was probably, I don't know, a year ago where somebody reached out to me, and it was a referral from another client, and they said, "Hey, I heard that you guys do podcast production and coaching. I'd love to sign up with you guys." And I said, awesome, cool. We'll have a chat, make sure I get to know what you're looking for, and we can kind of take it from there. This person becomes a client, and then they said, is there anything else that you guys do that might be beneficial to us? And I said, well, yeah, we actually have a social media department, and this person was a business owner that owned like 15 businesses. And this person said, all right, how much is it? And I told them. They said, awesome. Let me give you 5 of my businesses, and then depending on how that goes, maybe we can send over the rest of the businesses eventually. And I made this mistake. I made the mistake of taking my focus off of being the podcast guy to do client delivery stuff for this person that was a social media client. It was a very big opportunity, right? If we were to get all 15 of these businesses, we're talking about roughly $100,000 a year. So this is a big opportunity in the business. But how much momentum did I lose by working every single day on this other social media project for 6 months, 7 months, I think I did it. And then eventually we built a team, and the team did amazing, and it was wonderful. But I probably lost a ton of momentum. We actually talked about that today on our Next Level You episode. And it's very similar. The thought process is, my thing is podcasting overall, Podcast Growth U, and soon to be Podcast Growth Nation, and then all the things that happens from there. I'm thinking about doing a course. I'm going to do a book, all of that stuff. And then Next Level Podcast Solutions. If I want to be the podcast guy, that's where I have to live. I have to live in those 3 arenas. Will social media clients come from the podcast clients? Yes, and that happens. But I chased something that was outside of what I want to do forever. Now, should I have said no to this opportunity? No. Should I have found a way to build the team faster in 2 months or 3 months instead of 6 or 7 months? Yes. Because I lost a lot of momentum in the podcast space due to that mistake. So it's very much on the same line where you have to stay focused on what your thing is. So yes, as a new podcaster, as an early podcaster, as somebody who has a lot of opportunities to build a website, build a mailing list, build a freebie, build a Facebook group, do more on social media, blah, 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 right? All these things. I would probably pick 3 things to stay super focused on. And when those 3 things become sustainable, you can add something else. But the overall theme is you should really pick 3 things as the through line of everything that you do. So now, essentially, I podcast, and I podcast about podcasting too. If I'm doing coaching, it's usually on podcasting. And if I'm doing speaking, it is now leaning more into podcasting and business and how the whole thing kind of works out. One of the speeches that I gave in Toronto was not about podcasting, but it was based on the knowledge that I've learned from podcasting. So it does connect. What I see a lot of people do, especially when it comes to the desire to monetize, is they try 15 different things instead of just choosing one thing and doing it really well. I had a coaching call with someone the other day, and they gave me their entire business plan, and they said, I have this, and I have this, and I have this, and I have this. And I said, we have to choose one of these things. We have to choose one of these things. You've heard me say this countless times. It's all about building demand. But you have to build demand for one thing before you can build demand for everything. Domino's started with pizza. Burger King started with burgers. McDonald's started with burgers. There certain places started with dessert. Other places started with breakfast, whatever it is. And then eventually, when you build demand, you can start adding other things to the menu. And again, yes, you can start a restaurant that has a menu, but you get the point that I'm trying to make. You kind of have to have one offer in the beginning, not a million different offers. Now, I can hear what you're saying already. Well, Kev, you say to have a freebie and you say to have something paid, and you say, yes, I do say that. But you notice how I don't say you should have 7 freebies and you should have 7 paid things. No, I think you should have 1 freebie, and I think you should have 1 paid offer. because it's going to be easier to build demand for that one thing than 7 things. Again, for a long time, all I offered was mindset coaching for at least a year. And again, in the grand scheme of things, maybe it's not that long, but our evolution has changed in a lot of different ways. But that's all I offered. There was nothing else. There was no other way that I made money. Then when we started doing the podcast thing, it became podcast production and podcast coaching. And that's still the majority of where my time goes on a day-to-day basis. Social media is a byproduct of that, but I would never have done social media just completely disconnected from the podcast stuff. Most of our social media clients are podcast clients that want help with social media. So it makes sense. Even people that don't work with us from the social media aspect, it's hard to do, from the podcast aspect, it's hard to get them as social media clients because that's not the thing that we do most. So even that's a very dangerous game. I've had a lot of people who have asked me about, well, how do I become a speaker? And you should talk more about speaking. That's not my jam. Speaking in terms of becoming a more effective speaker, sure. I've done coaching on that. I've done speeches on that. I've done trainings on that for sure. But in terms of getting speeches and becoming a paid speaker, it's not my jam. I've been paid to speak and I've had opportunities, but I don't really know what the system is because that has been a result of the podcast. Everything that we have in terms of results are a byproduct of the one thing, which is the podcast. Then me wanting to be the podcast guy means I'm going to go on as many other shows as possible so I can get really good and meet people. I'm going to have a Facebook group. It's about podcasting. And then all my products and services will be based on adding value to podcasters because that's the identity that I'm trying to build. But if I go outside of that silo, I'm not going to have the same level of results. So if you're a mindset coach, you're most likely going to do mindset coaching. And yes, eventually you can have courses and books and that type of stuff. But if you don't have demand, it's going to be really hard to sell a bunch of different stuff. So in the beginning, I think no matter what, you should probably pick 3 to 5 things max. And those are the silos that you stay in, especially if we're talking about monetization. I'm telling you, this has been a very, very powerful yet sad thing to see. And I have somebody in mind when I tell this story. This person was a client for a while, and we would do calls every other week. And every other week when we connected, this person would have a new idea. Oh, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. This is why this isn't working. I'm going to try this. This is the new thing. And the sad truth is, it never worked. And I would tell them, we need to create a longer leash. Every time we meet, you have a new idea. And I love the fact that you're so creative, and I love the fact that you're so passionate about helping people. But 2 weeks is not a long enough leash to see if this is actually going to work. It's not long enough. I had done 300 podcast episodes before I ever started helping podcasters, and I think I only got like 3 or 4 clients the first year.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hurwitz. So last year, I wanted to quit everything. I wanted to throw in the towel. I wanted to hang up my microphone. And Kevin said no. Kevin said, keep going, Jen. You've got this. And oh my God, I'm going to cry. And I did. Coaches need coaches, y'all. And working with Kevin has been one of the best experiences of my life. Oh my God, I'm crying. Kevin, you are the best. I could not do this without you. And thank you. Thank you for being you and the amazing human that you are.
And that was a lot of work. I was doing a lot of work to get clients, to try to figure out how this whole thing was going to work. But if I had one-on-one coaching and production and a book and courses and all of that stuff, I don't think it would have worked the way it worked. Because one, you know how much time it would have taken to do all that? It would have taken a year at least to get all that stuff out. So I would have been waiting an extra year to start the process. But I didn't have enough demand. I didn't have 1,000 people who were interested in what I was talking about. Maybe 100 people will buy the book. And then maybe 40 people will download the course. And then maybe 15 people will want coaching and podcast production. so much for being a speaking coach. I didn't have the demand for that yet. That's not how it worked. It's very different if you already have a large audience, which most people, when they start, they don't. It's just a very different game. So we have to really stay focused on like 3 to 5 things, and I think we need to simplify our monetizable things as much as possible. I'll do an episode on this at some point, maybe, or maybe I can just do it here. I don't know. How far in are we? 14 minutes in. Today, we have a lot of different quote-unquote revenue streams. So we have one-on-one coaching for Next Level You. We have group coaching for Next Level You. We have an app that's free, but eventually it will be paid. We have courses, most of which are currently free, but eventually will be paid. Then outside of that business, we have live events and we have speeches. So that right there is kind of like 6 revenue sources. Then for Next Level, for this, we have podcast production and podcast coaching. So that's 8 revenue streams, technically. And we also have a physical product for NLU, so that's 9 revenue streams. So we probably have around 10 quote-unquote revenue streams. But here's the thing. The only ones that have made recurring, sustainable money are coaching and podcast production. I think we've probably sold like 30 or 40 of our physical products, which are the Next Level Dreamliner, which are journals. And that's been over the course of, I don't know, maybe a year. I think we got them out earlier this year, right around the new year maybe. I don't remember. It's been a weird year. But okay, 30 of those at, let's say they're $30 a piece. Okay, that's $900. Cool. We don't make most of that money because we're doing it through Amazon. So let's say we get, 50% of that. All right, we made $450 this year with that. Cool. But that took us 7 years to build the demand for. And if that was all the money we were making, we wouldn't be growing as a business. So this is my ultimate thought. A lot of those things that I just talked about do not make enough money for us to live off of. The app we've made minimal money on, and we have invested thousands of dollars into the app, and it's still in beta testing, so we're not making any money on that. If anything, we're losing money on that. But that's a long-term thing. We probably did that too soon, because we spread ourselves too thin with all of our products and our services and our different departments that we have. At one point, I think we had 26 departments in the business. And then a lot of those we've taken off of focus and we've put kind of into coast mode because we were spreading ourselves a little bit too thin. And sometimes the best way to learn that is to go do it. But I want to use my experiences and my failures and my mistakes and my lessons and my resistance or whatever and my successes to add as much value as possible. So just be very, very, very careful of that. I am willing to bet for most podcasters, especially early ones, the reason you are not making money is not because you don't have enough offers, unless you have 0. It's probably because you have too many offers. And you can't really run the system of getting people to sign up to your offer. If you have 5 different offers and you only have, and I'm not saying this is bad, but you only have 50 people listening to each episode, if 1% of those people are going to buy something and then there's 5 different things to buy, they don't know what to do. And if we're talking about sales and we're talking about having conversations with people, you don't really know where to send people either. You've got to figure out what's best for them. So that would be the lesson. The too long didn't listen version of this is don't spread yourself too thin with all the stuff that you're trying to do, because if you're doing 5 things at 50%, I would rather you do 3 things at 80%. That's one. And then if you're somebody who is focused on growing and monetizing specifically, don't overwhelm yourself into having 5 different offers because after a month, the first one didn't work. You might just not be running the right system yet. You might not have the right lead gen. You might not know what strings to pull yet. And that's totally normal. That's not a you problem. That is just a problem. building demand and getting to know your audience and all of that is the challenge. That's why podcasting is hard. And that's why you're listening to this podcast. You're not the exception to the rule if you're having problems. If you're not having problems, you are the exception to the rule. We're still having, I don't want to say problems, but we're having resistance. We have to figure stuff out, and we have to get better. It's not like I got to where I am today and that was it. I just stopped growing. I don't have to get any better as a podcaster, a speaker, a coach, or any of that. So that's my goal. My goal in this episode is to kind of take you behind the scenes a little bit and, I don't know, maybe talk about stuff that a lot of other people wouldn't talk about, because talking about my mistakes doesn't necessarily feel good, but I do think it's super valuable for you because you might be making similar mistakes right now. The hardest thing is, if you started a podcast and you are talking to yourself about monetizing it, committing to the fact that you're going to stay within that genius zone. You're going to stay within that realm. You're going to stay within that category. It's almost like, and the analogy I've used on other podcasts is, there's a couple ways to do it. You could start a business that's a landscaping business, and you could also do snow plowing, and you could also do gutter cleaning, and you could also do house cleaning and garbage removal. You could do those 5 things, but you're probably not going to be as good of a landscaper as you would be if you just did landscaping. That's kind of what I'm talking about here, being a specialist. Being a specialist at that one thing that you want to be really good at. But here's the problem. It might take longer to build that. It might take longer to survive. You might have to survive longer and really focus on honing your skills at that thing. When I started, I was doing mindset coaching. And then it was kind of like peak performance coaching. And then some people wanted help with fitness coaching. And I did all that because I needed to pay the bills. But there was eventually a line in the sand that I drew where I went to Alan and I said, hey, I'm only going to do podcast coaching moving forward. To the point where I had one-on-one mindset peak performance clients that I passed over to Alan. I gave up money to go focus on the podcast thing. So you might have to do that too, where you might end up turning down opportunities that seem aligned but aren't as aligned as they could be. I'm not telling you to do that every time. I mean, if you're going to go broke if you don't make the money, then make the money. But the goal is to try to stay in as much alignment as possible. And again, easier said than done. This is a challenging thing that you are embarking on. Becoming a full-time podcaster, a full-time content creator, an entrepreneur, your own boss, creating your own business, that is a lot of stuff. So I don't expect it to be easy or sound easy. But that's a simple but common mistake that I see, especially from new podcasters. We've talked about it on both ends, right? One common mistake is not doing enough, just doing the bare minimum, like we talked about last week. But the opposite of that is doing too much, burning yourself out, putting too many eggs in too many baskets, and just not waiting long enough for them to hatch, and then not seeing any results, and then thinking you're doing something wrong. Yeah, you can put all of your eggs in one basket, and that can be dangerous too. But at least in this case, I am saying eggs as in focus, eggs as in intention, eggs as in expectations, not necessarily results. Because the results will come if we do the right things in the right way for the right people long enough. But it kind of has to be all of those things together. So hopefully that is valuable. I wanted to share a little experience that I had because, yeah, I am as guilty of all of these things as anybody. I have most likely made more mistakes as a podcaster than you will, or you have at least. I've had a lot of opportunities to make mistakes, but I've also had a lot of opportunities for lessons. So last thing, kind of an analogy to end with. I am a bodybuilder. I like lifting heavy weight, and that's the thing. That's my thing. If I want to be the best bodybuilder I can be, I'm probably not going to train for marathons. Because number one, I'm a far better bodybuilder than I am a marathon runner. And if I'm doing those two things, I'm probably not doing either of them to the maximum result I could if I just did one. Just like somebody who is a really good marathon runner, they're probably not going to train bodybuilding because it's probably going to hurt them as a marathoner. Now, don't quote me and don't say there's science out there that proves otherwise. I'm not saying it from that perspective. I'm just saying if you're trying to do two things really, really, really well and they don't necessarily connect in order to make each other better, you're unfortunately probably getting worse at one of those things. So just make sure that everything connects nicely. I've had a lot of podcast breakthrough sessions where the person wants to monetize their podcast, but what they talk about on the podcast is not the way that they want to monetize. They have some sort of software that helps something, and they talk about mindset on the podcast. It might be a little bit harder to monetize that way without some tweaks. There's probably going to be some tweaks that need to be made in order to do that because it isn't in the same silo. And you've heard me say that a million times, and I probably sound like a broken record, but I think it's a lesson that bears repeating because there might be somebody new listening to this episode who hasn't gone back yet. And it's just the thought of if we had a waterfall, the water that's at the top of the waterfall, we also want to get all the way to the bottom of the waterfall. We want it to stay in alignment. All right, enough about that. I am done blabbering. I am actually, after this, going to a Zoom event that is, I don't remember who it's by, but it's something I saw at Podcast Movement 2024, and it's the podcast State of the Union, I guess, for lack of better phrasing. So anything I learn, I will bring back and report. As always, if you are struggling with anything that we talked about today, if you feel like you are spreading yourself too thin and you want 3 or 4 or 5 things to focus on, or if you feel like you don't know what those 3, 4, or 5 things are to focus on, I'll have my link below for a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session. And again, keep an eye out for Podcast Growth Nation. It's already created. I just want to make sure that when I start it, I have the system, I'm able to post in there consistently, and I'm able to add value in there consistently. I don't just want a Facebook group to say I have a Facebook group. I want it to be powerful. I want it to be valuable. And I will always be looking for feedback and what you are all looking for from that Facebook group as well. So keep an eye out for that. I hope that you are not spreading yourself too thin. I hope that you are committed to digging 3 30-foot holes or 3 50-foot holes or 3 100-foot holes instead of 100 1-foot holes. And I hope you're enjoying the process. As much as it is challenging, as much as some days maybe it sucks, I hope the process is going well. As always, keep on crushing it, keep on podcasting, and I will talk to you all next week.